The rain hit hard enough to make drivers focus only on the road ahead. That was exactly the problem. Nobody was looking at Lina. She stood near the shoulder of a busy Oklahoma highway, soaked from head to toe, waving both arms whenever headlights appeared in the distance. One car passed, then another, then 5 more. Not one slowed down. Not one rolled down a window. Not one asked if she was okay. Lina stepped closer to the edge of the road and lifted her phone. 3% battery. She pressed the screen. No signal. She took a shaky breath and tried again. Still nothing. "Come on," she whispered. "Just one call." The phone blinked. 2%. A pickup truck rushed past, spraying water across her jeans. Lina squeezed her eyes shut. "Thank you," she muttered sarcastically. "That was exactly what I needed." Normally, she would have laughed at her own joke. Tonight, she couldn't. Her hands trembled as she looked toward the dark road. Time was running away from her. Every minute felt important. Every minute felt expensive. She checked her phone again. 1%. Her heart pounded. A few feet away stood a bus stop bench. She had already waited there nearly an hour. No bus, no rideshare, no friend available, no family close enough, just rain, traffic, and fear. A pair of bright headlights appeared in the distance. Lina immediately stepped forward. "Please stop." The words left her mouth before the vehicle even reached her. The black SUV looked different from the others. New. Expensive. The kind of vehicle she only saw in advertisements in downtown business districts. To her surprise, it began slowing down. Her heart jumped. Finally somebody had seen her. The SUV moved closer, closer, closer. It nearly stopped. Lina took a hopeful step toward it. For the first time all night, relief touched her face. Then the vehicle accelerated and disappeared down the highway. Lina stood frozen. The red taillights became smaller and smaller until they vanished completely. For several seconds she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even process what had happened. The hope had lasted less than 5 seconds. She looked down at her phone. The screen went black, battery dead. Now she had no ride, no phone, no way to call for help, and no idea if she would reach the hospital in time. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, have you ever been in a moment when you desperately needed help and everybody seemed too busy to notice? And if stories about kindness, second chances, and real-life lessons mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe. Every like and comment helps YouTube share these stories with more people who need them. Lina stared into the rain. She thought the worst part of her night had already happened. She was wrong. Lina stood beside the highway, staring into the rain as if willing a miracle to appear. Nothing. The road stretched ahead of her. The cold settled deeper into her clothes. Her phone was dead. The black SUV that had almost stopped was long gone. For the first time that night, a frightening thought entered her mind. What if she didn't make it? She pushed the thought away immediately. "No," she whispered. "Not tonight." She folded her arms tightly across her chest and looked down the highway once more. Headlights moved in the distance. None of them slowed. None of them cared. A laugh escaped her mouth, though there was no humor in it. "Well, Oklahoma, you've really outdone yourself tonight." Another car passed. Another truck. Another opportunity disappeared. Lina lowered her head. That was when she heard it. The sound of tires cutting through wet pavement, not moving away, coming back. Her eyes lifted. Far down the road, headlights turned. The vehicle was heading toward her. Fast. Lina squinted through the rain. Her heart skipped. No, it couldn't be. The black SUV, the same one. The vehicle she had watched disappear only minutes earlier. It moved steadily toward her until it finally slowed beside the road. This time it stopped completely. Lina didn't move. She had spent enough time in life learning that not every offer was safe. The passenger window lowered. Warm light spilled from inside the vehicle. A man sat behind the wheel, white, well-dressed, confident. The kind of person who clearly lived in a world completely different from hers. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Rain continued falling between them. Finally, the man looked directly at her. His voice was calm. "Get in, I'll take you." Lina blinked. That was it. No long speech, no questions, no conditions, just 4 simple words. Yet something about it made her suspicious. Most people who wanted something from her talked more than that. She stepped closer but kept a safe distance. "You drove away." The man nodded. "I did." "You changed your mind?" "I did." "Why?" The question hung in the air. The man seemed caught off guard, almost as if nobody had ever asked him to explain his motives before. Lina studied him carefully. The expensive watch, the luxury vehicle, the polished appearance. People with money often believed their help should automatically be trusted. Lina wasn't one of those people. She crossed her arms. "Can I ask you something?" The man nodded again. "Go ahead." Lina looked straight into his eyes. "Are you helping me because I'm in trouble or because you're trying to feel good about yourself?" Silence. The question hit harder than she expected. The man didn't answer immediately. In fact, for the first time since stopping, he looked uncomfortable. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Lina noticed it right away. Most people had rehearsed answers. This man suddenly didn't. Rain tapped against the SUV. The highway hummed in the background. Still, he said nothing. Then something surprising happened. Instead of giving a perfect response, he laughed softly. Not at her, at himself. The kind of laugh a person makes when they realize they've been caught off guard. That's a fair question, he admitted. Lina raised an eyebrow. So? The man looked out at the rain for a moment, then back at her. The truth? The truth? I don't know. That answer stopped Lina. It wasn't what she expected. Most wealthy people she had met liked sounding important. This man sounded honest. I saw you standing here, he continued. I kept driving. His eyes lowered briefly. 3 miles later, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Lina remained silent. And I turned around. For the first time that night, she felt her guard lower just a little. Not completely, just enough. The man extended a hand toward the passenger door. I'm Francis. Lina looked at the door, then at the rain, then back at Francis. Every instinct told her to be careful, but another reality stood directly in front of her. She had no phone, no ride, no options, and time was running out. Slowly, she reached for the passenger door handle. As she opened it, she looked at Francis and said, If this car costs what I think it costs, please drive like you got a heart and not just insurance. For the first time all night, a genuine smile appeared on Francis's face. And for reasons neither of them understood yet, that simple joke changed everything. Lina climbed into the SUV and immediately felt the difference between her world and Francis's. The seats were warmer than her apartment had been some winter mornings. The dashboard looked more expensive than anything she had ever owned. For a second she simply sat there, dripping rainwater onto leather that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She looked around, then looked at Francis, then looked around again. Finally she sighed. Well, if I ruin these seats, just remember I arrived pre-soaked. Francis laughed, a real laugh. Not the polite kind he used during business dinners, not the practice kind he gave reporters. A real one. It surprised him. Lina noticed. What's funny? You. That doesn't sound like a compliment. It is. She pointed toward the windshield. Good. Keep driving before I start charging appearance fees. The smile stayed on Francis's face as he pulled back onto the highway. For the next few moments, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped against the glass. Traffic moved steadily around them. Yet something felt strangely comfortable. Not because they knew each other, they didn't. Not because they trusted each other, they certainly didn't, but because neither of them was pretending. Francis finally glanced toward her. Hospital? Yes. Are you hurt? No? Family? Lina looked out the window. Her expression changed instantly. The humor disappeared. The answer mattered. Someone important. Francis noticed the shift. He didn't push further. Years of business had taught him when to ask questions. Age had taught him when to stop. Lina appreciated that. Most people became curious and demanded details. Francis simply focused on the road. For several miles they drove in silence. Then Lina spoke again. Can I tell you something? Sure. When you drove away the first time, I called you every name I could think of. Francis burst out laughing. I'm almost afraid to ask. You should be. Was I at least creative? You don't want the answer. They both laughed. The tension eased, yet underneath the jokes was a reality neither of them could ignore. Lina had been standing alone in the rain, and if Francis hadn't returned, nobody else had shown any sign they would stop. That truth sat quietly between them. Before this story continues, let's take a quick moment to pray. Dear God, thank you for every person watching today. Bless their homes, their families, their health, and their future. When life becomes difficult, remind us that kindness still exists and that hope is never farther away than your love. Guide us to help others when we have the chance and give us strength when we need help ourselves. Amen. Welcome to Love, Money, and Secret, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, we're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way. Now, back to our story. Francis kept his eyes on the road. Lina looked out the window. Neither of them realized that this ride was about to connect their lives in a way neither could have expected. Because the reason Lina was rushing to that hospital wasn't just about keeping a promise, and the truth waiting inside that building would force Francis to confront a problem connected to his own business world. A problem that had already changed lives, including Lina's. And before the night was over, both of them would learn that sometimes the person standing alone by the road is carrying a kind of loyalty that money can never buy. Lina had never been the loudest person in her Oklahoma neighborhood, but everybody knew when she was around. Not because she wanted attention, because she knew how to make people laugh when the day had already taken too much from them. At 24, she worked long hours wherever honest work opened a door. Some weeks she helped clean small offices after closing. Other weeks she picked up shifts at a local grocery store stocking shelves, carrying bags for older customers, and smiling through tired feet. Her neighbors respected her because Lina never acted helpless. Even when her money was low, her head stayed high. Even when life pressed hard against her, she still found a way to say something funny. One evening, while carrying 2 grocery bags up the stairs to her small apartment, one of the bags split open. A can rolled across the hallway and hit her shoe. Lina looked down at it and sighed. Even the beans are trying to escape. A woman passing by laughed, and Lina smiled like nothing was wrong. That was Lina. She could turn embarrassment into a joke before pity had time to enter the room. Inside her apartment, everything was simple. A small couch, a kitchen table with one uneven leg, a stack of bills she kept face down because looking at them too long did not make them smaller. Still, she kept the place warm. Not rich, not fancy, warm. She believed a home did not need expensive things to have peace. That evening, Lina stood at the sink washing a cup when her phone rang. The sound made her pause. She dried her hands quickly and picked it up. Hello? The voice on the other end was tense. Lina's smile faded. What do you mean? She listened. Her fingers tightened around the phone. No, I'm coming. She moved fast. Keys, jacket, wallet, phone charger. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to breathe. Before leaving, she looked around the apartment as if trying to remind herself not to fall apart. You made a promise, she whispered. So move. She rushed outside and hurried down the stairs. Her old car sat in the parking lot, but when she turned the key, the engine clicked once and gave up. Lina stared at the dashboard. Not tonight, she said. Please, not tonight. She tried again. Nothing. Her eyes lifted toward the road beyond the apartment complex. The hospital was too far to walk. The buses were unreliable at that hour. But waiting was not an option. So Lina grabbed her bag, locked the car, and started moving toward the main road. She did not know yet that before the night was over, the whole world she understood would collide with the world of a man named Francis, and that one desperate walk would become the beginning of everything. Lina left the apartment complex with her bag pressed tightly against her, sighed, and her phone clutched in her hand. The sky had already turned dark. Rain began falling before she reached the end of the street. At first, it was light, then it came harder. Lina pulled her jacket around herself and kept walking. No problem, she muttered, because apparently tonight needed special effects. Her joke gave her only a small breath of strength. She checked the time. Too late. Every delay felt personal. Her old car had failed her. The bus stop was still several blocks away. The rideshare app kept loading without giving her a driver. One person from her neighborhood had already said they were too far away. Lina did not blame them. But blaming nobody did not solve the problem. She reached the bus stop and stood beneath the small shelter, watching cars rush by. The hospital felt painfully far from where she stood. Her phone buzzed again. Low battery. Lina tapped the screen and tried calling one more time. The call failed. She swallowed hard. Please, she whispered. Just let me get there. The rain blew sideways, wetting her face and sleeves. She stepped closer to the road, hoping a passing driver might slow down if they saw her clearly. A sedan passed, then a truck, then another SUV. Lina raised her hand. Nothing. One driver even looked directly at her before speeding away. Lina let out a short laugh, but this time it sounded tired. May your GPS take you somewhere confusing, she said under her breath. Still, she kept waving. She was not standing there for herself. That was what kept her feet planted even when embarrassment started. Burning in her chest. Somebody she loved was inside that hospital, facing a terrifying moment, and Lina had made a promise. She would not leave them alone. Not when fear was loud, not when the room felt cold, not when they needed one familiar face. Her phone dropped to 3%. She tried the rideshare app again. No cars nearby. 2%. She looked down the road and saw headlights approaching. She stepped forward. Please stop. The vehicle did not slow. Water splashed near her shoes. Lina wiped her face with the back of her hand. Now she was angry. Not loud angry, focused angry. The kind that made her straighten her back and refuse to collapse. Then, from far down the highway, a black luxury SUV appeared. It moved smoother than every other car, its headlights cutting through the rain. Lina raised both hands. For one brief moment, the SUV slowed. Hope jumped in her chest. Then it drove past. Lina stood still as the taillights disappeared. Her phone screen went black. Dead. She stared at the empty road. No, she whispered, but 3 minutes later, the same SUV returned, and this time, it stopped. Lina stood beside the open passenger door for half a second longer than necessary. The rain pushed against her back. Francis kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting near the gear shift, careful not to reach toward her or make her feel trapped. That small detail mattered. Lina noticed everything. The clean leather seats, the quiet engine, the warm air coming from the vents, the expensive dashboard, the man behind the wheel who had driven away once, returned once, and now looked like he was waiting for her to decide whether his help was safe. She finally climbed in and pulled the door shut. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Water dripped from her sleeves onto the floor mat. Lina glanced down. "If this car has feelings, please tell it I apologize." Francis gave a small smile and pulled back onto the highway. "It'll survive." "That's easy for you to say. I look like I fought the rain and lost by decision." Francis almost laughed, but he held it in because he could still see fear under her humor. "Which hospital?" he asked. Lina gave him the name quickly, then leaned forward as if her body could make the SUV move faster. Francis entered the location and pressed the accelerator with control, not panic. "How far?" she asked. About 20 minutes." Lina closed her eyes. "Make it 15. I'll get you there safely." She opened one eye and looked at him. Safely is good, slowly is not. Francis nodded. "Fair." The SUV moved faster, but steady. Lina held her bag against her chest and stared through the windshield. Her lips moved quietly, but Francis could not hear the words. He did not ask. He had spent years in rooms where people explained too much, promised too much, and meant too little. Lina was different. She sat beside him with soaked clothes, sharp jokes, and a kind of fear that did not ask for pity. After a few minutes, he said, "You don't have to tell me anything, but are you in danger?" Lina turned toward him. "No." "Is somebody hurting you?" "No." "Are you sick?" "No." Francis waited. Lina looked away again. "Somebody I love is at that hospital. That's all I can say right now." "That's enough." The answer surprised her. She expected more questions. Most people wanted the whole story before deciding whether someone deserved help. Francis simply drove. Lina studied his face from the corner of her eye. "You always this quiet?" "Usually." "That must make business meetings awkward." "It depends who is talking. So you're rich and mysterious?" "I wouldn't say mysterious." "Good, because I don't have time for mysterious. I need reliable." Francis smiled again. "I can do reliable. We'll see." The words were playful, but the meaning was serious. Lina was not handing him trust just because his car was warm. Francis understood that. For the first time in a long while, someone was not impressed by what he owned. She was measuring him by whether his actions matched his words. That made him sit a little straighter. The hospital sign appeared in the distance. Lina's breath caught. Francis noticed and changed lanes. "We're almost there." Lina nodded, but her hand tightened around the bag. "Thank you," she said quietly. The words were simple, but Francis heard the weight inside them. He did not know yet who was waiting inside that hospital. He did not know what promise Lina was trying to keep. And he certainly did not know that this ride would soon lead him straight to a truth connected to his own world. For now, he only knew one thing. He was glad he turned around. The hospital sign grew brighter through the windshield. Lina leaned forward in her seat as if the entrance might move farther away if she blinked. Francis noticed her breathing change. "You okay?" Lina looked at him quickly. "That depends. Are you about to ask me a rich person question?" Francis frowned slightly. "What is a rich person question?" She held up one finger. "Number 1, asking if I have a backup plan when clearly I am sitting in a stranger's car during heavy rain." Francis gave a quiet laugh. "Fair." She held up another finger. "Number 2, asking why I didn't just call someone, as if poor people don't know phones exist. I wasn't going to ask that." "Good. You were about to keep your good record." Francis slowed near the hospital entrance and glanced at her. "You don't trust easily." Lina looked at the sliding doors ahead. "I trust actions. Words are cheap. Some people buy plenty of them." That answer stayed with him. In his world, words were dressed up and sold every day. People promised loyalty across dinner tables, praised him during meetings, smiled for photographs, and disappeared when the benefit ended. But Lina, sitting beside him soaked and worried, had said more truth in one sentence than most people said to him in a month. Francis pulled near the emergency entrance. Before he could speak, Lina reached for the door handle. "Thank you for the ride. I'll come in with you." She stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" "In case you need help, I needed a ride." "You gave me one." "I know. Then don't turn one good thing into a takeover." Francis paused. He was used to solving problems quickly. Money made that easy. Calls, access, influence, doors opened, people moved. But Lina was not asking him to take over her life. She was asking him to respect the boundary around it. "You're right," he said. Lina blinked. That answer surprised her more than the SUV had. "I am?" "Yes." She tilted her head. "You say that often?" "Not as often as I should." Despite everything, Lina smiled. That sounded painful. "You want a chair?" Francis laughed. This time he could not stop it. It was not just the joke, it was the timing. She was scared, soaked, rushing into a hospital, yet somehow still brave enough to make him laugh and honest enough to correct him without begging. That was the moment something shifted inside Francis. He had stopped because he saw trouble. Now he was beginning to see Lina. Not as a helpless girl, not as a charity moment. As a strong young woman carrying fear with one hand and dignity with the other. Lina opened the door, but before stepping out, she looked back at him. "Francis." "Yes?" "If you really want to help, park properly. Don't block the ambulance lane trying to become a hero." He looked at the curb, realized she was right, and immediately moved the SUV forward. Lina nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Rich and trainable." Francis shook his head, smiling. "I'll park. You do that." She stepped out into the rain and hurried toward the entrance. Francis watched her go, but this time he did not drive away. He parked. Not because he wanted praise, not because he had decided to rescue her, because something in her voice had made him understand that real help required patience. By the time he entered the hospital lobby, Lina was already at the front. Desk, speaking fast but clearly. Francis kept his distance, close enough to be useful, far enough to prove he had listened. Lina glanced back once and saw him standing there. He did not wave, he did not rush forward, he simply waited. For the first time that night, Lina's face softened. Not fully, but enough for Francis to notice, and enough for the story between them to begin changing. Lina reached the hospital desk, still catching her breath. Her clothes were wet, her shoes squeaked against the floor, and her hair clung to the side of her face, but she stood straight. "I need to know what room," she said quickly. The person at the desk asked for information. Lina answered fast, almost too fast, like every second had a price. Francis stood several steps behind her, close enough to hear pieces, far enough not to crowd her. Lina glanced back once. He stayed where he was. That mattered. After a short wait, she was directed down the hallway. Lina turned and started walking quickly. Francis followed, but not beside her. Behind her, respectfully. Halfway down the hall, Lina stopped and looked at him. "You don't have to keep following me." "I know. Then why are you?" "Because you may need someone to stand nearby." She studied him. "Nearby is different from taking over." "I'm learning." Lina gave him a tired look. "Good. Because I don't have strength tonight to train a billionaire from scratch." Despite the fear in her face, Francis smiled. They continued down the hall. When Lina reached the room, her hand froze on the doorframe. The humor left her completely. Francis saw the change. This was not ordinary worry. This was love mixed with fear. Lina stepped inside slowly. The room was quiet except for medical sounds. Someone she loved lay in that bed, weak and resting, connected to machines and surrounded by the kind of silence that makes people whisper even when nobody asks them to. Lina moved closer, her voice softened. "I'm here." Francis stopped outside the doorway. He did not enter. He only watched Lina take the person's hand gently, like that hand was the most valuable thing in the world. "I told you," Lina whispered. "I told you I wouldn't leave you alone." Her voice cracked, but she did not cry. "Not yet." Francis lowered his eyes. He had been to private hospitals, charity galas, medical fundraisers, and polished events where people spoke about care with perfect speeches. But this was different. This was a young woman soaked from the rain, exhausted from fear, still standing because she had made a promise. Lina leaned closer to the bed. "I had to fight the whole road to get here," she said softly. "But I made it." Francis swallowed hard. Something inside him shifted again. He had spent years surrounded by people who promised loyalty when cameras were around. Lina had no camera, no audience, no reward, only love. And she had crossed a hard night just to keep her word. Francis remained outside the room for several minutes. He did not interrupt. He did not ask questions. He simply watched Lina sit beside the bed, holding the hand she had fought so hard to reach. The sight stayed with him. Eventually, Lina stepped back into the hallway. She looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally, the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying responsibility for too long. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Francis handed her a bottle of water he had quietly purchased from a vending machine. Lina looked at it, then at him. "You keep doing helpful things." "I'm trying. Careful. You might develop a reputation." Francis smiled. That would be terrible. Lina accepted the water. After taking a sip, she leaned against the wall. The silence between them felt different now. Less guarded, not comfortable, not yet, but honest. Francis glanced toward the room. You really meant it when you said you had to get here. Lina followed his gaze. Yes. You made a promise. I did. Francis nodded slowly. What kind of promise? For the first time all night, Lina answered without hesitation. The kind you don't break. Francis waited. Lina looked through the small glass window of the hospital room. A faint smile touched her face. Years ago, when life got difficult, I was told something I never forgot. She paused. People stay when it's easy. Love stays when it's hard. Francis listened carefully. Lina folded her arms. Since then, I decided something. What? If somebody I love is going through their worst moment, they shouldn't have to face it alone. The hallway became quiet again. Francis looked down briefly, then back at her. That's rare. Lina shrugged. It shouldn't be. No? It shouldn't. The conversation could have ended there, but a voice from farther down the hallway caught Lina's attention. She turned instinctively. The words were ordinary. Yet one phrase stood out. A company name. Francis saw her expression change immediately. The humor vanished. The warmth disappeared. Something else replaced it. Recognition and pain. You know that company? Francis asked. Lina laughed once, a short, bitter sound. Unfortunately, Francis frowned. What happened? Lina stared at the floor. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she finally looked up. The reason somebody I love is in that room started with a problem. People reported months ago. Francis's expression tightened. Lina continued. The warnings were ignored. His stomach sank. Ignored. That word carried weight, especially in business. What kind of warnings? He asked. Lina hesitated, then answered carefully. The kind that should have protected people. Francis felt a chill run through him, because he recognized the company name she had reacted to. It belonged to one of the largest divisions connected to his business empire, not directly under his daily supervision, but still his responsibility. Lina noticed the change in his face. You know them. It wasn't a question. Francis answered honestly. Yes. The hallway suddenly felt smaller. Lina studied him. For the first time since getting into the SUV, she looked genuinely disappointed. Not angry, disappointed. And somehow that felt worse. You own part of it, don't you? Francis didn't lie. Yes, Lina nodded slowly. For a moment she looked away. Francis expected her to walk off, expected her trust to disappear completely. Instead, she asked one question. A simple question, a difficult one. If you found out people got hurt because somebody chose convenience over responsibility, what would you do? Francis met her eyes. The answer came immediately. I'd fix it. Lina held his gaze. No matter what it cost? Yes. No matter who gets embarrassed? Yes. No matter how much money is involved? Francis didn't hesitate. Yes. For the first time, Lina looked like she wanted to believe him, not because he was rich, because he sounded sincere. Whether he truly meant it remained to be seen. But Francis knew one thing. The night was no longer just about giving a stranger a ride. Now it was personal. Because the problem that brought Lina to this hospital might lead directly back to his own business world. And if that was true, he intended to find out exactly what happened. Before we continue, take a moment and tell us in the comments, do you believe a person's true character is revealed when doing the right thing becomes expensive? And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Love, Money, and Secret. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories and life lessons to people around the world. Francis looked toward the hospital room, then back at Lina. Neither of them knew what the investigation would reveal, but both understood something important. The truth was finally getting closer. Francis barely slept. The conversation in the hospital hallway stayed with him long after midnight. Most people would have driven home and forgotten about a stranger they met during a storm. Francis couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lina standing beside that highway. Then he heard her question again. If people got hurt because somebody chose convenience over responsibility, what would you do? The next morning, he arrived at his office earlier than usual. The building was quiet. The city outside was just beginning to wake up. Francis walked directly into his office and opened files connected to the division Lina had reacted to inside the hospital. At first, everything looked normal. Reports, approvals, budgets, compliance documents, the kind of paperwork designed to reassure executives. But Francis had spent years building companies. He knew one important truth. Sometimes the problem wasn't hidden in what documents said. Sometimes it was hidden in what they avoided saying. He started reading deeper. Hours passed. The more he examined the records, the less comfortable he became. Several complaints had been submitted months earlier. Small warnings, minor concerns, requests for action. Each one seemed insignificant on its own. Together they formed a pattern nobody had taken seriously. Francis leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightened. The warnings had not disappeared, they had simply been pushed aside. Not because solutions were impossible, because solutions cost money. For the first time, Lina's words became painfully real. Somebody had chosen convenience, and now real people were paying the price. Francis continued digging. The deeper he went, the worse it became. The issue connected directly to the circumstances that eventually affected the person Lina had rushed to see in the hospital. Not intentionally, not through cruelty, through negligence, through people deciding somebody else's problem could wait until tomorrow. Francis closed the file. His office suddenly felt smaller. For several minutes he sat silently. Anger grew inside him. Not at Lina, not at the situation, at himself, because while he had not personally caused the problem, it had happened inside a business carrying his name. That responsibility belonged to him. His phone sat on the desk. Francis picked it up, then stopped. The easy option would be protecting the company, controlling the story, managing the damage. Most powerful people would start there. Francis looked through the office window. Then he thought about Lina sitting beside a hospital bed because she refused to abandon someone she loved. Suddenly, the easy option didn't feel acceptable anymore. He opened the file again, this time not as a businessman protecting profits, as a man looking for the truth. And once Francis made that decision, there was no turning back. Francis did not call Lina immediately. He wanted facts first. Not excuses, not promises, facts. By afternoon, the truth was clear enough to make his stomach tighten. The complaints had been real. The warnings had been documented. People inside the company had treated them like small expenses instead of human problems. Francis stood in his office with the file in his hand. For years, he had believed success meant building something large, enough for the world to respect. Now he understood that size meant nothing if the people beneath it were ignored. He pressed a button on his desk phone and spoke calmly. "I want every repair started today." A voice on the other end began explaining cost, timing, and public image. Francis cut in. "Not tomorrow. Today." There was a pause. He continued. "And every family affected will receive support. Medical bills, housing assistance if needed, lost wages, all of it." Another pause. Francis's voice stayed steady. No quiet settlement that hides the truth. No blaming people who complained. No punishing workers who reported the problem. He looked at Lina's name written on a note beside the hospital room number. "We are going to correct what we should have corrected months ago." By evening, Francis returned to the hospital. Lina was sitting outside the room with tired eyes and folded hands. When she saw him, she stood. "You found something." Francis nodded. "I did." Her face tightened. "And?" He took a breath. "You were right. Warnings were ignored." Lina looked away for a second, as if the truth hurt even though she had expected it. Francis continued. "It happened inside a division connected to my company. I won't. Pretend that doesn't matter. I won't hide behind the fact that I didn't personally read the complaints." Lina's eyes returned to him. "What are you going to do?" "I already started." She said nothing. "Repairs begin today. Support begins today. Anyone affected will be helped directly. The people who buried the warnings will be removed from decision-making." Lina searched his face carefully. "No speech? No speech? No cameras? No big hero moment?" Francis almost smiled. "No." Lina nodded slowly. "That's better. I'm sorry," he said. The words were quiet. No performance, no polished tone, just accountability. Lina crossed her arms, but her voice softened. "Sorry doesn't fix everything. I know, but doing the right thing helps." Francis nodded. "I'm going to keep doing it." For the first time since learning the truth, Lina looked at him without disappointment. Not with full trust yet, but with respect beginning to return. "You understand something, Francis?" "What?" "People like me don't need powerful people to feel bad for one night. We need them to stay honest after the room gets quiet." Francis accepted that. "You have my word." Lina studied him. "Your word is on trial." "That's fair." A small smile touched her face. "Good. Because I don't give easy grades." He smiled too. "I'm starting to understand that." For a moment, the heaviness between them lifted. Not completely, but enough to let something warmer breathe. Francis had not fixed the past in one day. No one could. But he had chosen truth when silence would have protected him. And Lina saw it. That mattered more than any expensive apology. Weeks passed before Lina allowed herself to believe that change was truly happening. She had seen people promise help before. Some came with sympathy, some came with cameras, some came with big words and small follow-through. Francis came differently, quietly. The repairs he ordered were completed. The affected families received support without being forced to beg for it. Medical bills were handled properly. Lost wages were restored. People who had been ignored finally had their complaints taken seriously. Lina watched everything carefully. She did not praise Francis too quickly. She did not treat him like a hero. She simply paid attention. One afternoon, she met him outside the hospital after visiting the person she loved. Francis stood near his SUV, not leaning on it like a man trying to look important, just waiting with 2 coffees in his hand. Lina slowed when she saw him. "You keep showing up," she said. Francis offered 1 cup. "I said I would." She accepted it, sniffed it, and raised an eyebrow. "This better not taste like rich sadness." He smiled. "It has sugar. Good. There's hope for you." They sat on a bench near the entrance. For a while they talked about ordinary things. Work, food, bad coffee, Oklahoma weather that could not make up its mind. Then Lina grew quiet. Francis noticed but did not rush her. Finally she said, "I was angry at you. I know. Not just because of the company. I know. I was angry because you looked like every person who could have. Helped sooner but didn't." Francis lowered his eyes. "That's fair." Lina looked at him. "But you didn't run from the truth." "No, and you didn't try to buy my forgiveness. I didn't want forgiveness that cheap." That answer stayed with her. For the first time, Lina smiled without guarding it. "Careful, Francis. You keep talking like that, somebody might think you have sense." He laughed softly. She looked toward the hospital doors. "My life still has hard parts. I know. I still have to work. I still have bills. I still have family to care about. I know that too." "Good," she said. "Because I don't need a man who thinks love is a rescue mission." Francis turned toward her. "What do you need?" Lina held the warm coffee between both hands. "Respect, patience, truth." Francis nodded. "I can give you that." She studied him. "Consistently." "Yes." Lina looked away, but her smile remained. "Then maybe we can keep talking." Francis did not reach for her hand. He did not move too fast. He simply sat beside her, grateful for the small door she had opened. And for Lina, that was enough for now. Months later, Lina stood at a community event in Oklahoma with her shoulders relaxed and her head high. This time, she was not standing beside a road hoping someone would stop. She was standing in front of people who had been helped, heard, and respected. The repairs Francis ordered had lasted. The support had reached the families who needed it. The division that ignored the warnings had been changed from the inside, and Francis made sure no one buried complaints again. Lina's life was not suddenly perfect, but it was stable. The person she loved was recovering. Her bills no longer felt like a wall closing in. She had found better work through her own effort, not because Francis handed her a life, but because the truth finally gave her room to breathe. Francis stood beside her quietly. No speech, no performance, just presence. Lina glanced at him. "You're awfully quiet today. I'm learning from you." "That sounds dangerous." "It's been useful so far." She smiled. A small group thanked Lina for speaking up and refusing to let the truth disappear. She accepted their gratitude with humility, but Francis saw the strength in her face. Later, when the crowd thinned, he walked beside her near the edge of the event space. "I'm proud of you," he said. Lina looked at him carefully. "For what?" "For standing when it would have been easier to stay silent," she softened. "And I'm proud of you." Francis looked surprised. "For what?" "For not hiding when truth became expensive." He smiled gently. "That means more than you know." Lina looked down as his hand moved close to hers. He did not grab. He waited. She noticed. After a quiet second, she took his hand herself. Francis looked at her. Lina smiled. "Don't look so shocked. You earned a little hand-holding." He laughed softly. Together, they stood under the evening light, no longer strangers from 2 different worlds, but 2 people changed by one night of kindness, truth, and courage. Sometimes the person everybody overlooks is carrying the kind of love money can never buy. Before you go, please like this video, share it, comment your favorite lesson, and subscribe to Love, Money, and Secret for more heartfelt stories.